Hello, it's the Geordie Journos. Am I swapping around there? What's going on here?
It's musical chairs.
Are you happy with that setup there, Jordan?
I like you in the top left. I like you above me because that's how I feel when I'm on the Geordie Journos. You above me.
Top left corner, that's where I always put them. Right. We're going live. It's not often that we go live. We've got a few people on watching, so we thought we'd try something different this week. Of course, we had the first ever. We do a match day live. Always jump on after games, but we don't often do outside of this. We launched the live a fortnight ago with Keith Patterson and CSL. It went so well. We're not expecting anything else like that tonight, but we just thought we'd come on. We've got a free night. It's bonfire night. I'm not sure there'll be any fireworks on this live tonight, but you just never know where the Geordie Journos are going to go. So, right, let's have it. What's that mean? Looking a bit flush. Hard day. Just bad. Look, anybody who knows me from all these years of doing lives, I've never got good lighting. So it looks like I've been tangoed again tonight, but I'll just have to take it. Jordan, you're very dark, and Dom, you're very slick with your new paintwork behind you.
Oh, thank you. I think if you were in this room, you wouldn't have a head because of your green screen.
What colour am I? I'm all pink, aren't I?
Yeah, you're like...
Oh, well. Bad lighting. We're real YouTubers now. Well, we do try. Right, what we're talking about tonight, lads? What we're saying?
I suppose we should probably digest a bit of Saturday again, and then maybe go into the questions because people sending questions in already. But I'm still feeling very positive off Saturday. I don't know about you two, but given how I felt after Chelsea in the league, now a video after Chelsea, it's been a very, very quick and class turnaround since then, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the one thing I would say, that anybody who hasn't seen my videos earlier this week will kind of not know our thoughts on this. But it was a week. It was a week that something needed to change, and Eddie Howe had to do something, and he did a lot. He did a lot more than I'd imagined he would do. I wasn't sure he had the amount of experiment and changes in his locker. However, he made sure that he did enough to answer some questions, I would say. I think it was a week of answers, when the week previous had almost raised so many questions. I think that's fair to say. There's a lot of talk on my colour. I can't help it, man. It is. I do.
You're still in Egypt, though.
I know, it looks like it, doesn't it? And it looks like I'm having a bad Photoshop with this background, standing close to the bonfire. Hey, I'm going to have to put some new lighting on, I think. Let's give us a second. Right, so I think your thoughts, Dom. What you thought about it?
No, I think big questions were asked of Eddie Howe after the Chelsea game, the away game, because of just how the season's gone in general, where Newcastle haven't played well, or if they have played well, they've lacked any real nous in front of goal, and they needed something to click. And Eddie Howe had to be brave. He had to make changes. We said after the Chelsea game, changes need to happen. And we're pointing the finger at Eddie Howe a little bit, saying he needs to find those answers. He's the man to make those decisions. And thankfully, the Carabao Cup game was probably the best thing that sort of happened to Newcastle, where at home, under the lights, could experiment a little bit, just naturally with the game on the Wednesday night. And he did that. And I think he found answers in that game. And we saw the positive signs and green shoots, as we keep referring to, in the Chelsea game, then really manifest in the Arsenal game. And Newcastle just took things up a level and carried up that momentum on. All I will say is it's really encouraging that Eddie Howe's found those answers, and Newcastle look like a team heading in a better direction now. But in terms of the Premier League, your bread and butter, it is only 3 points they've picked up. They've turned a corner, but you can only really say they've turned things around if they go and back that up with a win at Nottingham Forest, which is a difficult ground to go to. They're in great form. few ex-Newcastle players involved. And then not only that, then you go in the other side of the international break and carry on that run till Christmas. Because Newcastle, I mean, we watched the Fulham-Brentford game last night, and that late double saw Newcastle drop back into for about 3 minutes, go in the top half, then back in the bottom half. And 10 games into the season, it's a decent chunk. So Newcastle really need to start putting a decent run of results together. Signs are positive against two big teams at St James's Park. Can Newcastle actually translate that and do it against the so-called lesser teams, even though Nottingham Forest are third in the table, away from home? And that's going to be a big challenge for Eddie Howe. Does he have those answers after finding some answers in the previous two games?
You tend to agree with that, Jordan, that the fact is it's probably too early now to say there's been a corner turned, isn't it? It's some answers, as Dom says, but not quite there.
Yeah, I think the away record is vastly overlooked, given how poor Newcastle have been away from home. Even this season have been fairly unconvincing in games. I think the best they've played is probably Everton away, and that was a game they should have won, drew nils each. The Wolves game was probably a 15-minute spell where they sort of blew Wolves away. And then you're going back to last season, which the away record was one of the downfalls. I know we always focus on injuries in terms of last season. But I remember from when they beat Sheffield United in September, I think it took until the end of January for them to get the next Premier League away win, which was at Aston Villa. And if you want to compete at the top of the table, obviously your home record is key. And I think Newcastle have proved that they can beat anyone at home. They've shown that over the last week with Chelsea and Arsenal, Manchester City at home. They can always battle someone at home and get a result against someone at home. But it's away from home. That's the big question mark now, I would say. If Newcastle can get the away form back to where it was a couple of seasons ago in that Champions League season, because it isn't just going out and winning games away from home, but it's being hard to beat away from home as well. And I don't think Newcastle have been that hard to beat away from home for a long time. As I say, since that Champions League season. So it's about finding the balance. And if you want to compete in those sort of top European places, then you do need to build some solidity away from home. And I think that's a challenge of Forest. I think it'll be a good barometer as to where they are, Newcastle, after two really positive results. Can you go to an informed Nottingham Forest who are flying, doing really, really well? Can you go there and get a result? And if you can, then I think we can maybe start to look at the season changing a little bit. Because it's great. They've had two really good positive results, but I think they've still got a lot of consistency to show between obviously Nottingham Forest and then moving into the season as well.
When I think about Forest, I can't be sure what I really feel about it. I'm not sure. There's two sides of the coin, the way I see it. Almost the last three results there, the penalties win, the Bruno magic last year, the Isak late penalty, the one before, which felt so significant in that season, if you remember back. You feel like maybe they're the due one, because they're a very good side at home and have been since they got promoted. And this season, of course, it's supercharged. That Forest have been one of the most impressive teams in units in the Premier League so far. But that also flips the coin for me that I'd be very, very surprised if Nottingham Forest finish in the top 3-4 in the Premier League. And they're going to have to sustain this kind of level of performance, and they will slip up. So while Newcastle might be due one down there, Forest could well be due one in the Premier League. So that's kind of the way I feel on it. Look, I think if Newcastle United could take parts of the Chelsea game, combine it with parts of the Arsenal game, although Forest will offer a totally different kind of approach. They'll not be in their face. Like Arsenal really went to press Newcastle more than the other way around, I would say, at the weekend. And Newcastle United dealt with that quite well and broke on them when they could. It's probably going to be a little bit more like the away games we've seen at lower table opposition, I would say, this time round, where Newcastle will be allowed to have a good chunk of the ball. And it's how they deal with the counters of the opposition, who we know are really good on their break. I think you look at, I would never have taken him at Newcastle United. I mean, there's still a chance yet. Alanga on the right-hand side is full of pace and he's caused Newcastle problems in the past. You look to the other side, Elliot Anderson can't get in because Hudson-Odoi's been rolling back the years to what he looked like when he was a kid, breaking through at Chelsea. Morgan Gibbs-White, anybody who's a regular watcher of the Geordie Journos will know that I'm a massive, massive fan of Morgan Gibbs-White. I think he's a type of player that he can go both ways. He works hard, he gets up and down, and he can create and score goals at his very best. So I think he's a real danger. And I'm not going to mention Chris Wood because I know Dom will be itching to talk about his love of Chris Wood. I'm just joking. He doesn't love him, but he might. And the rest of the team, I think they're a decent side. I'm not really sure how it goes. I think it's the Premier League though. Like I've not known one so close, and I think I've said that a couple of times this season where the top isn't quite as good, and I don't think the bottom is quite as bad as what last season was. So I think there's almost been a little bit of a leveling out. Like the two ends, the top and bottom are much closer, and you're seeing a lot of points shared out, and I think that's quite obvious when you look at where Newcastle are. I think 11th in the table, all the way up to the likes of Forest, and you're talking it's a game difference almost still, which is a little bit unusual when you get to this stage of the season. You normally look at this point of the season, and the Premier League doesn't change all that much when you get to this point. But looking at this current Premier League, it could change loads because there's so many teams are within a point 2, 3, 4 of each other from the bottom half right up to the Champions League places, which is. It may not be. A statistician out there might be saying this is quite regular, but it feels different, in my opinion, this season. What's your thoughts on the weekend, Dom?
I think you're right. It does feel different this season in terms of the league and Newcastle. I mean, if they go and beat Forest, be 1 point behind them, and this is Forest who've had an unbelievable start, sit third in the table. So it's one of those strange starts to the season where no one's really pulled away. Okay, the three in the bottom are sort of like there, and it's sort of set. But after that, probably mid-table upwards, it's a bit of a free fall. And Manchester United sit below Newcastle. They're probably going new manager, couple wins away, and then we'll right back in that European contention. But not to pull out a cliche, it's something Eddie Howe would say. It's probably far too early to really start looking at the league table with any real sort of critique or seriousness, really, because you're looking and it's so early in the season. Different teams have played different teams, but I think the 10 game mark is usually where things start to settle down, but we're just not really seeing that, I don't think, which is a good sign for Newcastle because obviously the league position isn't great, but then Nottingham Forest is a massive test for them this weekend, and it's probably one of them where on the back of 2 wins, albeit one in the cup, one in the league, would possibly take a point away from home against a Forest side, very good at home, beat West Ham 3-0 last time out, in really good form. And if you can just carry on that momentum, 3 games unbeaten, okay, it's 1 win in 7 in the Premier League, but heading into an international break with those positive signs, with a bit of a good feeling back around the club, then I'd probably take that. But obviously, you want to be building on what was a really good performance, as I think you said, and I'd probably agree, best performance of the season, or the best performance in a long time, actually, against Arsenal on Saturday. If you regressed at all, it would be a slight disappointment. So if Newcastle can build on that and pick up another 3 points, then we're heading into November, 11 games into the season, with a real positive feeling, and it goes to show just how quickly football can turn around.
Jordan, what do you think the key was? Because we all sat a week and a half ago talking about it, and we've all hinted at it saying changes were made. What do you think the catalyst was to this, a feeling of a turnaround? There hasn't really been a massive turnaround, but it was 2 really positive results after a run of a couple of iffy ones, wasn't it? What do you put that down to?
I think going back to your best balance, I would say. So I think you're putting in your best players isn't necessarily your best team. And I think that's the category Sean Longstaff would probably fall into, where you look at the midfielders that Newcastle have gotten, your midfield three, if you include Joe Linton, will probably be Joe Linton, Tonali and Bruno. But as I say, that's not necessarily the best balance for the team, and I've said it for a long time. And I think a real catalyst to what happened last week was the left-hand side. Joe Willock and Joe Linton. That was, we keep going back to the Champions League season because that's the standard we hold this Newcastle team to, and it's very much really the same players that they've got now from that Champions League season 2 years ago. So that's what I look at, and I look at that team from that season, and the Joe Linton and Joe Willock combination in the back end of that season was one of the main reasons as to why they got top four. Joe Linton for me, and to be fair, your controversial opinion about 12 months ago now was Joe Linton is actually a left forward, and that's not saying he can't play midfield, because I think you put midfield, he does do a job. But look at the last two performances. That tells you all you need to know about him as a left forward. I'll nick your term again as well. So it was almost like he's a defensive left forward where he's just an outlet where you can put the ball up to him. There was times in the Arsenal and the Chelsea game where Cher's finding right on the byline on the left hand side, and he's carrying the ball forward, coming inside, linking up with Joe Willock. Just that balance on the left hand side for me was massive. And yeah, you look at that midfield, I think Sean Longstaff in many ways epitomises sort of the high press from midfield, a relentless runner who doesn't stop running until the end. He plays 90 minutes. I'd suspect he'd probably do another half an hour, maybe more, because he's that fit. And then you've just got bits of quality in there. The ultimately what won Newcastle the game at the weekend was, that sort of determination, hard work, being really hard to beat, but also that little bit of quality as well. And we got that through Gordon and Isak. So I just think there's a better balance throughout the team. Maybe it's not playing your best players as such. Maybe it's not playing your best players in the best positions, because I'd say Anthony Gordon is more effective on the left than he is on the right. But it creates a balance, and I think they had that balance. They've had that balance last two games. And looking at Forest, I'd probably stick with the same team and see how it does. And if they go and get a result at Forest, then you can probably tells you that's being close to the best 11 that they've got at this moment.
Right, I'm going to take this moment. We've all had a chance to have a little bit of a say on what's gone before and what we see happening for the weekend ahead. So I'm going to take this moment just to mention, do jump in the comments. We'd love to take your comments. Any questions that you've got, do fire them our way. We're looking to probably be on here till 9 o'clock-ish, so do hang around. We'll get through every comment that you do send in, as we always do on the lives on the Geordie Journos. I want to say thanks to our sponsors as well, Forever's Financial Planning, for all of your bespoke financial advice, whether that be pensions or anything a little bit further. Do contact them. I'm pretty sure the details will be below in the description, or if not, you can find them plastered all over every single video that we do on Geordie Journos. And if you do want to get involved with the sponsorship of Geordie Journos, do get in touch. All of our details are below. Right, I think we've had a few questions, haven't we, Jordan? I think it's probably fair to maybe jump in and get some conversation starters and see what people think.
Trying to mute myself there whilst trying to find the comments at the same time. I got myself in a pickle there. We'll go to the first question that came in, which I suppose I'll just link to what we've been talking about so far. Magpie Ranger, my favourite podcast. Thank you. Now that Eddie Howe went back to the personal and functional style that made us successful, do you think the current squad can play a possession style? Who wants to answer that?
I mean, it depends what you mean by a possession style. I think Newcastle historically under Eddie Howe have been sort of just below the trademark possession teams in the league. They've been like maybe 8th to 11th in terms of possession in games over the course of a Premier League season. So I think it's not really... They've got the players who can do it, the likes of Bruno, Tonali, Lewis Hall, Fabian Schär, good players on the ball that can keep possession. But I think if they become one of those teams, it's finding the ways to unlock the doors. And I think I wouldn't necessarily say that's Newcastle's strong suit. So I think we'll see Newcastle dominate possession in odd games, but I don't think it becoming part of their identity is necessarily the best way forward for them. So I'd just see them. We've seen what they're good at. We know what they're good at historically, which isn't possession isn't necessarily a huge factor in that. So I'd want to see just more of what we saw against Chelsea, more of what we saw against Arsenal, not necessarily passing teams to death, which I think sometimes teams can be guilty of, and it's not particularly exciting to watch and doesn't always yield the results as well.
Doesn't feel, like you say, it doesn't feel very Newcastle United, does it? The idea of passing teams to death. I've described it as like blunt force trauma at times. Like they'll literally outrun you. They'll win it high. They'll be right in your face. That's the kind of Newcastle United that everybody has warmed to and come to expect. The thing is, I think what they learned last season is you can't play like that. You can't play like that all game every single week. It has to be picking and choosing. We saw a lot more of that against two good sides who would look to dominate. It's going to be a different challenge altogether, as I mentioned earlier. Do I think they wanted to transition to being more of a control, possession-based side? I think that's certain. I think, for me, the signing of Sandro Tonali really indicated that. I think it was something they wanted to do from the start of last season. It hasn't quite gone down that route. I think when Tonali's played the last few weeks, I think the Everton game, yes, it was Everton, but they're not. Let's just judge the game as it was. They had a lot of the ball and they controlled a lot of the game and possession. They did very similar against Brighton too in the home game. Both weren't very good results, of course, but I could see it being something similar. And it does beg the question: does he tweak things? Does he move away from the team that served him so well and the formation and style that served him so well in those two games? And does he alter and shift? And I think that's what good managers have to do. I think that's the thing we're yet to see definitively from Eddie Howe, is whether he can pivot in these type of games and alter and change. And I think he has to be able to do that this weekend, because I suspect if he goes with the same style and same way of playing, it won't be quite the same and it won't get quite the same results. However, that doesn't mean I'm not delighted to see the return of that, because I am. I would much rather be watching in your face Newcastle United, who I've seen some criticism from fans elsewhere online about the celebrating of throw-ins and stuff. I love all that. Like, I really do. I think I go back to the PSG game and there was nothing more. Such was the tension in the game and everybody was on edge that any minor win was celebrating. At times it's kind of felt like that. It felt a little bit like that in the last two games with a cup progression on the line. With Chelsea, everybody was cheering every kick, every header won, etc. And the siege mentality bit against Arsenal as well for that second half, who Arsenal had most of the ball. I mean, I'm not going to say it did a whole lot with it. I don't think Nick Pope had a save to make, but that siege mentality grew and grew and grew, and it brought the crowd into it. But I just don't think it'll be the same type of game at the weekend. And I kind of feel to balance out going into the international break, I do actually feel, and this might go against anything I've said in the past, I do feel like a win is possibly the only thing that really restores any parity in terms of the points gained this season and the position where they'll take in the league table. I think anything less than that going into the international break still leaves that question mark. It's almost like the exclamation mark on the end that Newcastle United are back as a force this season and can compete would be going somewhere like the City Ground and coming away with another 3 points, which they've done the last couple of seasons.
Right, breaking news. We've got a Newcastle United goalkeeper watching tonight. Just seen his name pop up in the chat there. I thought I'd put him on screen.
You reckon it's him? It's got to be, isn't it?
Definitely. I think his profile picture there is of Fabrizio Colaccini strangling some little Portuguese lad. So it's definitely the real John Ruddy. Definitely. Anyway, sorry. Just made it amuse me, that one. Let's get some more questions. Should we move on to St. James's Park? I have a question about this development of St. James's Park.
Anything really. Anything anybody wants to ask, let's just fire away and get the questions.
Right. So here's one, yeah. Andy Musgrove of the Chronicle asked Simon Bird if the Saudis had lost interest, and he didn't think so. Simon asked where the major sponsors are from PIF companies, so said it was possible. What do you think?
So I'll answer this one first if you want. It's not my understanding that the Saudis have lost interest. So I would agree with Andrew Musgrove if that's what he said in that podcast. But also I think the sentiment that maybe Simon Bird is hinting at there would be that the big check hasn't been written. There's been no sponsorship deal done. There's no training ground. There's nothing tangible to take apart from some clean windows and a new club shop. The Saudis have left behind. There isn't anything. That's almost like the big thing. It's not just the sponsorships, which is a big thing. The even bigger thing is when that first spade goes in the ground. That's when they leave something tangible. And I've said it on here before, and I'll say it again. I think the best thing to do for most fans, that would be my advice, is the stance that I have, is I've never heard anything to suggest they aren't interested or will not continue to be interested. The only thing I've heard is it's a long-term project, which any long-term project, if they suddenly decide to put the spades in the ground, then that underlines that. And I think it almost ends any talk of, are they really serious about this? But until then, I would maintain a level of healthy skepticism. I don't think there's any point in the trust the process mob. I think they're getting less and less. I think there's less and less people who have the blind faith in what will be is going to happen, and what will be is going to happen with the manager even, and the owners as well. There's got to be a level of skepticism and critique, and you can't just say, because people don't always get it right. The owners won't always get it right at Newcastle United. They'll make mistakes. Eddie Howe will make mistakes at Newcastle United. Blind faith never got anybody anywhere, in my opinion. I mean, there might be some kind of history buff or some kind of historical example of something happening with blind faith. I have no idea. However, I don't think it's a good stance to have. I think some skepticism, healthy skepticism, and that's not saying the doom mongers, it's never going to happen, they're going to bail out, etc. But I do think it's important to have that sort of a little asterisk against it, that until there is a spade put in the ground, a significant one. We're not talking about the licks of paint, and I do get criticism for saying that, but it's a Rafa reference. The licks of paint at the training ground. It has to be something significant. Something that's significant that were the Saudis to leave or ownership were to change, there will be some lasting legacy of this ownership, because that's what I want to see. I want to see a strong Newcastle United for the next 100 years, never mind the next 10.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Sorry, I'll keep you on that, Liam, because there's another question about St James Park, which probably ties in, so we can tick this one off. But where is your opinion, knowledge, of where we are in regards to stadium development? Any news? That's from Gaz.
Well, Dom, you might want to have your say on that, and then I can come back in.
No, I was just going to carry on from your point about the spades in the ground thing, because the biggest thing the club have done in terms of a construction project has probably been the staff, which is, again, only a temporary thing. And that something will have to happen, you'd think, to that if St James's Park, at least the Gallagher stand, were to be expanded. But that seems like a long way away yet. You're looking at the Euros coming up in 2028, the talks that have taken place behind the scenes with the club, the council, things like that, Leazes conservation area. There's so many moving parts. And then, of course, the feasibility study, which the club have got the results back from. More information on that next year. But at the moment, it just seems like it's all quiet. But sometimes things being quiet isn't a bad thing.
What was that question again then, Jordan?
I mustn't answer it very well if you're asking that.
No, I'm just wondering what the question was.
Just Gaz was asking if you hear anything on the potential development of St James's Park, and what are your thoughts? I would get it back up, but I've lost the question.
I've heard plenty, is the honest answer, all of which we've shared amongst each other when we've all heard little bits and bobs. We all get little bits of information about these things. I've heard plenty. I've heard everything imaginable. Some of the more legitimate sources are really pushing the idea that it will be in and around the same footprint, but not necessarily St James's Park. But we'll have to wait and see. Who knows, really? But I have a really good idea at the start of next year. I think there's a lot of people reading a lot into what they see in the media. I think everybody's reading every slight opinion piece. I know friend of the channel, Craig Hope, did a really relevant and interesting piece last week. I see a lot of people reacting to that, saying he's been briefed to write X, Y, and Z. I don't necessarily think that was the case. I've not asked him that direct. I don't know if any of you guys have either, but it was an important piece, and it actually really struck a chord with me, and it might have other people out there too. I've talked about this in the past, that many generations of my family have been able to walk up to St James's Park and do what I did, get a ticket, watch Newcastle United regular, and it really gets at me that that's not really what I can do with my children. I want to be able to do the same again. I want them to come and experience St James's Park. I want them to feel the love. They love it when I take them every so often, when I can. We're at the Wimbledon game, but it's just not the same. I would love to be able to buy tickets. I'd love to get a ticket myself, and I wouldn't have to sit with you two. But no, it's just one of those things. I think there'll be lots of people out there feeling that, and that was one thing that really Craig got stuck into in that piece, was him saying his feelings towards his boys as well, thinking he'd love to be able to take them to the match and let them feel what he felt as a kid. Now, that brings out another question. Would that ever even be plausible with a new stadium? Who knows? I think there's a real drive in football in general now to move away from the 35 quid a ticket, season ticket model, or whatever it may be, in current prices. There seems to be a switch away towards the match goer who will pay 60, 70, 400 quid, as we were just looking the other day, Dom, for the...
Yeah, that's why I was laughing, because you were talking about getting tickets, and I know firsthand how stressful you found it, or have found it in the past, trying to get tickets. So
yeah, and it's... We even looked at the corporate, didn't we? We were like, why just get some corporate tickets? And I went on, and it was like 400 quid a pop, which is just, I mean, to a normal person in a normal job, that may be totally affordable for lots of people out there, but that is not affordable for me to go to the match. I couldn't physically afford to do that, and I'm pretty sure I can speak for you guys on here as well and say it's probably exactly the same. And there'll be a lot of people feeling that. There'll be a lot of people desperate to go and can't get in, even with memberships. They're unable to do so. So that's the thing. But would it ever go to that? Who knows? I'd like to think, and I've got faith that there would be some element of that. And I would hope to try and be at the front of the queue, as I'm sure thousands and thousands of others would be in the same position. But going back to it, I've heard bits, and I think it'll be, the way it sounds, it would be in and around the same footprint would be the preference. But I think we'll all be waiting with bated breath till January to see if that really is the case. And if it was, I think we'll all probably agree as well, we've spoke about this, that none of us could really complain too much. So, yeah, there we go.
I would say, sorry, John, it was just all of us, I don't know about you guys, but my opinion's probably gone from St James's Park expansion to almost switching. I think Craig Hope alluded to it in his piece, but going from, I want to stay at St James's Park almost no matter what the cost, but then going, actually, if you can build something just north on state-of-the-art stadium on Leazes Park, if that is at all feasible, that's probably the way forward for me. So I've probably changed my opinion slightly. And me and Jordan have discussed this on a video previously, when the talk about the stadium last sort of resurfaced. And yeah, I was just wondering if you guys were sort of the same mindset, or whether you were always, or still, staunch St James's Park, or always move out elsewhere.
I'm very much about building a new stadium if you can get it within the vicinity of where St James's Park is now. I would hate to have a new stadium that was out of the city centre, because I think that's what makes St James's Park so unique, is its location. So, there's talk of Leazes Park and whatever, and if you want to use that for an example, if Newcastle were to build a state-of-the-art stadium on Leazes Park, because I'd like to think that with the wealth PIF have, that if they were going to build a new stadium, it would be the best stadium, or one of the best stadiums in the world. So I would be totally up for that, as I say, as long as it was within where St James's Park is now. I think that's really crucial for me. But I think Craig Hope's piece is really, really good. I think it captured the mood of how sort of I was feeling as a supporter, and probably how my dad as well and family are feeling. Where I think I'd asked me 12 months ago, I would go, no, absolutely not. Stay at St James's Park. We have to redevelop St James's Park. We can't leave St James's Park. But I think with information I've sort of been drip fed over the last 12 months, I think I'm sort of come round to the not an acceptance, but maybe the fact that moving out of St James's Park is actually a possibility. And if that's what it takes for the club to move forward and have to compete against the big guns, then so be it. So that's the way I look at it now. Very different view to what I had 12 months ago.
No, that's interesting. I think it's probably brings out some strong comments in the comments, Jordan. I don't know if there's a few on there. Even bang up the negative ones. I think it's a really divisive subject. It's something that you're either in one camp or the other. Like I've said before, my thoughts on it. I think it's St James's Park is very unique. We go to these new stadiums elsewhere that don't have the same kind of atmosphere. It's Manchester City is a big example of that. West Ham is an even bigger example. Anybody who went to Upton Park, and there'll be plenty of people in the comments and watching this now who probably did, will know that going to the current form of West Ham's home stadium is just night and day compared to what that was. But the league is littered with them. So it's a hard one, and it's a balance to strike. I think you've got to. I think keeping it in and around the same area. I said footprint earlier, not necessarily the same footprint, but in and around the same part of the city was the hint that I was kind of getting at. If you keep it there and build it big enough to, not just big enough, but good enough to be almost a league leader, a world leader in what it does, then I think that would be the type of mark that I would hope would tally with the kind of takeover that we kind of thought was going to happen. And I still believe we'll get to that point. There's nothing ever been suggested to me that it won't. I've seen someone in the comments suggesting I was being negative. I don't really know what I've been negative about. I think my stance on it is reasonably positive. However, I just think until there's anything major happens and until there's a legacy left by the Saudis, which if they walked out tomorrow, I think this is a fair comment. Jump in if you think I'm talking rubbish, and jump in the comments. But until there was a legacy left, they could walk away tomorrow, and there would be very little to show for what had gone in the previous few years.
It could have been any takeover almost, like any
playing spot.
Yeah,
That'll be it.
No, I think you're right. Where it has been a great investment and plenty of progress, but that could have been any takeover. This wasn't necessarily the takeover, so far, if they were to leave, it wouldn't necessarily be the takeover you probably had in your head when it went through in October 2021. It's a long-term project. It's 5, 10, even more years in the making. But like you say, if tomorrow, what have you got to show for it? It would be the players are better and the training grounds had a lick of pain. And you've got a fan zone, which is good, to be fair.
No, it is. It's a really good development. It's almost just bringing Newcastle United up to levels of all the other clubs that we visit in a season, where you've got that kind of atmosphere. And I criticise West Ham Stadium for that, but the sort of bars and restaurants around the stadium and the walk up, it's brilliant, really. When you think if you wanted a safe experience, a little bit sterile in some respects, and doesn't capture the essence of what going to the football as we would all know it and most people would know it. Or, however, it's I think the Stack does get that a little bit more, even if the food is lovely but overpriced, like amazingly priced. It is, a lot of it is nice though, however. All boosting PSR. Any more questions, Jordan? Because we'll have to rattle through a few of these. It's 40 minutes in.
Well,
hey, we've still got 200 people on.
On the subject of PSR, Mark Doyle wants to know about the January transfer window. I think there'll be a marquee signing, or do you think they will use it as an excuse of it being difficult market and wait until the summer instead?
Tom?
I think Newcastle tried, we know, to sign Mark Gay in the summer. Will they go back? I think there's potential there to get a cut price deal, but has that ship sailed, maybe. Right wing, is that becoming more of a priority? It sort of depends how the next month or so unfolds, with if you're playing Anthony Gordon on there, Joe Linton on the left. Do you need, if things are working, do you need that marquee right winger? I'd argue you absolutely do. So I'd like to see a marquee signing in that position. I wouldn't necessarily say marquee or a centre back, big money centre back signing is necessarily the answer in January anyway. And I think there's probably also a bit of going back to what Paul Mitchell said back in September after the summer transfer window closed. He had a hands-off sort of supportive role in the summer. He said the next transfer window or future transfer windows, he'd be more hands-on. So there'd be an element of that where after a disappointing summer of failing to sign certain targets, Newcastle had money to spend, as Eddie Howe told Jordan in a press conference. Newcastle had the money there to spend. So do you go in January, we need improvements to this squad, which unless they win every game from here on out, here to January, they absolutely do need improvements to the squad. So I feel like Paul Mitchell will be wanting to get his hands dirty, if you like, in the transfer market and bring in at least one big signing. That's what I'd like to think. Speaking to him personally a month or so ago, and also based on the failures of the summer, where Newcastle, Lloyd Kelly's the major signing from the summer, who's a free transfer. So I think work needs to be done to improve the squad in January.
I think you've got to look a little bit further on the Paul Mitchell thing. I'm still reluctant to sort of put January on him. I think a lot of people will want to. I genuinely think the Paul Mitchell thing is about the bigger picture. I don't think it's about the immediacy, and I still think still only 6 months into the job. I think to judge him on January might be a bit early, but I can see the reason why people will, and there'll be a look to it. Because I don't think the work that Paul Mitchell has done in the past is necessarily always about the stuff here and now. We've seen that with the Ashworth stuff, the director of football, however it's sporting director, however it's tailored. I think Mitchell's been brought in, I think, to provide more value, to squeeze more value out of the market. And I think a lot of that is young value, which might not necessarily be immediate impact. However, I think Newcastle United will go for somebody in January. I think it will be an immediate impact player. I think the season, the way it's gone, if it continues in the same similar-ish, even slightly better sort of manner, is probably going to still be in the balance in January. And I think it could really be probably one of the most key months since the takeover. It could be one of those defining months where if they can go and get rid of a couple, which is going to be key, and replace with a couple who have an immediate impact on the team, then you're talking about, you could be talking about an also-ran season where you're finishing, I say this in current context, where you're finishing 8th or something like that. Could even two really good signings could kickstart you and fire you into a 4th place finish or a 5th place finish, depending on, might still be Champions League if English clubs do really well this season, as they already have been, well, mostly been doing so in Europe. And I think the only way to do that, the major thing I'll be doing is firing up something for the front line. I think it's skating on thin ice, thinking that the answers have been found in Joe Linton, Gordon and Isak. That is Newcastle United's best 3 forwards as it stands. However, it takes a couple of knocks here and there, or 5 yellow cards, which I know Joe Linton's very close to suddenly you have to change it back up, and you're back relying upon Almiron, Murphy, Barnes, who haven't really set the fire alight, I don't think. For quite some time. I would say the most reliable of the 3, and I may take some criticism of that, is probably Jacob Murphy, but I think he's of levels. He's certainly of a certain level. Harvey Barnes has shown in flashes within 25 yards of the goal that he can do things, and hasn't really shown me anything beyond that, apart from, I'll go back to, was it the Fulham game? I thought in defeat he was Newcastle United's best player and really tried to make things happen. Hasn't really done much of that aside from that, and hasn't impressed us when he started games mostly. So I want to see improvements there. But then you're left relying upon that. And then all it takes, again, is a little injury to Isak, and the whole thing's blown open again. So I think they have to sign a forward. It gets people excited. People in the crowd would feel it if you sign a forward and suddenly either answer the right-hand side problem and give yourself another option there, or sign another forward and give Isak a little bit of a break. Again, I'm going to say, all of a sudden, Dan Burn having a couple of all right games, and Fabian Schär, I mean, he hasn't been great the last few weeks, to be fair. But the centre-half's getting by. A couple of clean sheets last week, can't fault it. Again, that's suddenly not the answer. It suddenly doesn't mean that you take your focus off that. I think it's very clear they need a centre-half to come in who can play football a bit and has a little bit more mobility than what is available at the moment. Sven Botman can do the football bit. He's a great one-on-one defender. He anticipates everything. He's timing. He's brilliant. However, he's not the quick mobility that I think that they've been looking to add and inject into that back line. But it looks, the way things are going, and Botman hopefully being back in and around that time, that's probably going to be kicked to the long grass, and you'd probably look to address that in the summer. For me, it's a forward player that helps to kickstart your season and gives you more options in a department that I think Newcastle United have been light in for about 3 years now.
Yeah, no, from Geordie asked if the right wing was a priority now. Barnes and Gordon can occupy that space, as well as Joelinton and Willock have to be a partnership on the left-hand side. I'd say a second striker will be my main priority.
I'd probably agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's
right winger, second striker.
And I'm just trying to find another. There was a question here about Anthony Elanga. I can't find it, but a question asked, do you think Newcastle will target Anthony Elanga again in January? I'm trying to find it here, but in the meantime, there it is.
I mean, there were definitely...
He felt a bit last minute, didn't he? He felt a bit...
Yeah, well, it wasn't quite last minute. Yeah, it was a weird one. It was almost like the framework for that deal was in place months ago, but they'd spoken about it back in June. And then all of a sudden, late hours of the transfer window, the summer transfer window, it emerged again that Newcastle had made a late move for him. How true that was, I'm not sure. I think Newcastle, the interest was there and conversations may have taken place. In terms of an actual bid going in, I'm not entirely sure. That might have been a story more from Nottingham Forest than Newcastle, but I think the interest is there. But I'd like to think, in my personal opinion, as a fan, as a journalist, that ship sailed. And okay, Anthony Elanga could have a great game against Newcastle this weekend, as he has previously, but is he really that upgrade which a 40 million plus price tag that he would demand, is he really that upgrade on the likes of Miguel Almiron, Jacob Murphy, Anthony Gordon playing on the right wing? I'd say he's a minor upgrade at best. So, and that's okay. I don't watch him week in, week out, but I think I'd like to imagine Newcastle would set the bar a bit higher than that.
I think all you had to do was look at the reaction of Forest fans, wouldn't you, when those bids were going in? I was away in Egypt at the time, but I know, Jordan, you were all over it like a rash that night, getting bits of information from all sorts of angles. But the reaction of the Forest fans told it all for me. When they seen the figures related to Anthony Elanga, they weren't disappointed if that deal had happened and it allowed them to do something else.
Yeah, I mean, there was although there was talk of the PSR swap between Anderson and Elanga. Obviously, we all know what happened there. Newcastle ended up with a goalkeeper they ultimately didn't want. But as soon as there was a report, I think, from TalkSport at the time, Alex Cooper, it was mentioned that Newcastle had placed a late bid for Anthony Elanga, and the deal was close and would look like would happen. Club sources immediately played that down. So there's a lot of people in the comments here saying that Elanga isn't the man that's going to take Newcastle to the next level, and I would probably go along with that. But maybe another player who Steve mentioned here, and Buemo, I wouldn't be against that one to say the least.
No, he's had a great season. He fits the bill, doesn't he? He's the left-footed player playing on the right who cuts in. We watched him last night with a keen eye, didn't we? We were all watching him. He didn't have a very good game, actually. He was not. Brentford were genuinely poor, and I was filled with confidence, and it was nice. the little scouting mission we went on to the Black Bull in Benton to watch Brentford ahead of playing them in December. But no, it filled me with confidence because I didn't think they were great, and I was less than impressed with Buemo. But realistically, if you go back to the videos that we've done a long while back, I think he was the name that we picked out probably in March, April time this year, saying we would love to have seen him targeted in the summer to fill that role. I think it's the fact he can play all three. He's quick, mobile, quite short, stocky. You know, he's just a real live wire and can finish and score goals. And I think the thing with Elanga for me, I almost see him as just I see him very Jacob Murphy like. He's just a quicker Jacob Murphy who can, you know, it wouldn't be a deal that would excite me. If Newcastle United said they haven't got a lot of money, which we don't, you know, we're not sure they really have because of this PSR thing. If they want to say that we're going to spend the majority of their budget on Anthony Elanga, I think it would be a very, very underwhelming next signing. Because it wouldn't be the kick up the backside that I think the forward line needs. I'm not saying he wouldn't add value. I think he would probably add value because I always ask the question, is he better than X, Y, and Z? And I think there's a case to be made for a few of those names that we mentioned earlier that he's better than. But is he enough? Is the gap enough for you to spend a significant amount of your budget? And I would say no.
Final one in January. How many players do you think Newcastle will sign in January?
I think it's probably what's more important in January is trying to get rid of players than selling. I think they need to sign players, but when you're looking at players' contract situations and just it's not a bloated squad, but there's levels to it, and certain players need ideally to move on while they still have any sort of value before their value absolutely drops through the floor or becomes literally nothing in next summer. So I think getting rid of players is important in January, and if you do that, then obviously players will have to come in the other way. I think Newcastle will have to sign or should sign at least a couple players in January, though January historically difficult. They didn't sign anyone last January, so I think it'll be hard, but if you can get maybe a couple players out, couple players in, refresh the squad, spend a bit of money, but balance things in terms of PSR and keep things relatively healthy, then I think that will be an ideal January window for Newcastle. But in terms of who they'd go after at this stage, it's a roll of the dice. It depends how things unfold over the next 2 months, really.
Roger Cook, regular watcher of the channel, shall I say. How likely is Eddie Howe to remain with the newfound winning dynamic formation, including good subs? Let's go with that one.
I feel like that's it's a bit of a loaded question that from Roger there. How long do I think he'll be continuing to make good subs? Well, I hope he does that all the time. How long do I think he will stick with this formation? I've got a feeling he'll go again. Just from like the things we pick up, and you guys as fans out there will probably pick up the same things. You kind of get a feel for the type of things that managers do, and I don't see him changing. Look, he surprised me last week with some of the changes and the depth of changes that were made, and it wasn't much of a surprise that some of those worked. Do I see him doing anything similar heading to Forest? I'd be surprised. So I think he sticks with this, and don't be surprised if it gets the kind of result that we all hope for, provided there's no injuries. I think he'll stick with it beyond too.
On that, Liam, then, have we gone back to the same team when we finished fourth? Which I think within little areas of the team, the left-hand side, bringing Sean Longstaff back in the midfield, I think Eddie Howe probably has gone back to a little bit of the fourth place team because many of the players are still here.
Yeah, I think it's got the same sort of DNA, hasn't it? The way that they're set up, the way that they're trying to play. but with slight improvements. That's how I would say it. I think Lewis Hall makes a big difference. Lewis Hall's form has been outstanding. If you go back to that team, you would have had Dan Burn at left back, who didn't really give you much at all, if anything, in a forward sense. He would make the odd trudge forward, make his effort to go on the overlap. But when Lewis Hall overlaps, there's real purpose. You know that when he gets on the ball, he's got a lethal left foot, and he'll find somebody or he'll create something. So he adds it's. I don't think they've had that kind of threat from a left back. And I was probably going to sound weird, but in that balance since Matt Targett. Targett that first season after he signed the 6 months on loan, his delivery into the box from that left-hand side was outstanding. It was superior in many ways to what was coming from the right-hand side. And I know it might be hard to remember for some people, but Targett's delivery, his lack of pace got found out defensively at times, of course, but his delivery and his supporting of the attacks was outstanding. His creating of chances. And we've got that back with Lewis Hall and then some. He's added that little bit of defensive nous, which he had to add if he's going to be a defender in the Premier League. And it's just been outstanding. So Joe Willock with Joe Linton, yeah, it's very similar. Sean Longstaff, the right-hand side's slightly different because that was one of the keys of that team was the Longstaff inside run, the Miggy cutting in from the right-hand side onto his left foot, the Trippier overlap or the Trippier finding Longstaff for that pass straight through. Now, we've still got Longstaff doing those kind of things, but there isn't the quality that Livramento had. Livramento doesn't have the quality Trippier did, and it's slightly different with it being two blokes who want to go on the outside, on the right-hand side with Gordon as well as Livramento. So it is a slightly differently, it's balanced differently, but I like it. I think it's got a good feel. I like the midfield with Sean Longstaff in. I like the midfield with Bruno in the middle. Me personally, I don't really see any need to change that. I think it works. I think he's actually this season, even though people might disagree, they might say, has he been the same player? Has he been as good? I'm a big Bruno fan, but that doesn't come from blind faith, as I mentioned earlier. It comes from watching a very, very good footballer play very, very well. And one thing that Bruno's really added to his game this season, his defensive work has gone up levels, in my opinion. I think the way he's able to close out attacks didn't really seem to be that much of a thing. He used to do it, but I think he's a Premier League leader in about 5 or 6 different statistics where ground duels, all that kind of thing, winning the ball back, most fouled, as we know, he's excellent at that. I think if Jack Grealish should have played more games, he'd probably be up there as well. But it's just that clever cuteness that is back with the likes of Bruno, and I wouldn't be shifting him from the middle anytime soon. Not when you've got the legs of Joe Willock, who looked fitter. That's probably the problem. It's easy to forget. Joe Willock probably isn't a top player or the answer to level, Champions League levels, probably isn't answer to every question. That's why Arsenal let him go. They've seen enough of him to know that he probably wasn't the answer to that. However, in this team, and the interchanging with Joe Linton, it causes all kinds of issues and problems for the opposition. Joe Linton, again, I'm at risk of sounding like one of these tacticals, aren't I?
That you love so much.
Joe Linton is the defensive forward almost who tucks in, and then Joe Willock is like some kind of, almost at times he was like a second forward, I thought, in that Arsenal game. He was the main chief support to Alexander Isak, even in the first half when it was even Steven. So no, I think there's a good balance about it. I'm happy with what I've seen so far, and like I say, we've all talked about the superlatives for all the players, but Willock was a massive part of that result the other day, along with Longstaff and everybody else in the team.
Tom, I'll come to you. What midfield do you go with for Nottingham Forest?
I wouldn't change things, though I'm also aware when Eddie Howe's got a good result or when Newcastle's got a good result and Eddie Howe hasn't changed things, it hasn't necessarily followed through. But I think the way Newcastle played, the balance of the team, like Liam said, it just felt right. It felt good. Watching it, past the eye test, past the statistical test as well, winning the game. I think the team looks better with Sean Longstaff in ultimately, and then Joe Willock, as Liam said, the support with Joe Linton, his link up with Alexander Isak as well when needs be. the team is just more functional with that midfield and with Joe Linton on the left. I wouldn't change a thing after the Arsenal game, to be honest. And whether that yields the same result, I'm not sure, because whether that translates away from home and whether for the way Forest play, I'm not sure. That's up to Eddie Howe to decide. But based on what I saw the last few games, and particularly on Saturday against Arsenal, I wouldn't change a thing. I think you've put in your best performance of the season in the midfield, and the front six, midfield three and forward three, have looked so good. You couldn't pick the best player out of any of them, really. All of them put in really good shifts. It would be harsh to drop any of them from the side.
Liam?
We'll have to fire through some of these questions. We've got plenty more.
Yeah, there's a lot to get through. On the subject of keeping things the same, Docky wants to know, do you think Anthony Gordon will be happy to play on the right? He can be just as effective out there, and he couldn't put that killer crossing on Saturday if he'd been on the left. So,
we would have struggled, like. Yeah, I mean, you've asked Eddie Howe about this quite a few times, Jordan, about signing Anthony Gordon, why he was signed. Was he signed as a left winger, right winger, and where he's most effective? Does he enjoy playing on the right? I think the fairly consistent answer is he prefers playing on the left, but hey, if he can still produce the numbers, he scored from the right before against Bournemouth and against Spurs, I think, a couple of years ago, and then got one of the assists of the season on Saturday against Arsenal. So he's shown he can still do it. He can still be effective. I still think left wing is obviously his best position, but if the team operates much better with him on that right side with Joe Linton on the left, then Anthony Gordon can still produce and be a threat in the final third, then I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be happy playing out there.
I think Alexander Isak will want him playing there with that kind of delivery. The centre forward doesn't want an inverted winger putting balls in. They want a proper fullback or a proper winger putting them in. So I think a lot of it's mentality. He's got all the skill sets to play on the right. However, he just clearly prefers to play on the left. And he did a great job. Really put a shift in for the team out there. I'd be leaving him out there.
Do you want to keep going through some more questions? Try and get through as many as possible. There's quite a few to get through here. So
keep going.
Why don't we just fire them in, and then we'll do quick fire answers and see if we can get
quick fire. Aye.
Yeah.
Right.
There's still 200 people listening, so obviously everyone listening, thank you. Please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell for all your Geordie Journos content. Of course, there's a super thanks button as well if you've enjoyed this stream. We will not say no to any donations, but yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Let's get through these questions.
Right. Question on the form of Lewis Hall and Tino Livramento. Have we now got our settled fullbacks for the next few years now?
I'd like to think so. I think that was the plan, wasn't it? When they went in and used that significant part of that budget to sign these two players. So they'd have made a serious misstep in the transfer market if these two aren't. And I think everything I've seen so far would suggest the two of them will be. I think the left back in particular is outstanding, really outstanding. I think he's got a very, very high ceiling. I do think I think if you're going to be negative about his game, does he lack a yard? He maybe does. He isn't the biggest. I don't think that matters too much. I think technically he's outstanding. And I think he'll start chipping in with more and more goals, the more confidence he gets, because he gets in some great positions, some great overlaps. And like I said, that defensive now's coming in has been excellent. Livramento has probably been a bit up and down, but I think he'll be good for going through this little period, and he was back to his best at the weekend.
Good quick fire answer, Liam.
I tried. It was only when I only remembered when I was halfway through. I was like, "Oh, I'm meant to be quick here."
I'll say yes.
Yeah, as a quick fire, I want to lighten the mood. Most important question of the night: who's looking after the tripod?
Me. As you can see, I'm making the most of it.
Yeah, not me. I'm quite a regular loser of tripods, so not me this time.
Right, from light-hearted to seriousness. Do you think we should bite the bullet and sell a top player, Isak or Bruno, for a large sum to fix the PSR issues and allow us to improve the overall quality of the squad? I'll let you guys tackle that one. I'll sit on the fence and watch you debate it, because it's a tough one. That good question, really.
Right, so I'm going to be really quick for you, Dom. You'll like this. I think it's inevitable, and whether I like it or not, I think progress can only be fixed by doing something like that. As much as I hate the idea of losing either of those two players.
Yeah, I don't like those two as examples, but I will just say yes, a big money record sale that smashes the sort of farce of 35 million for Elliot Anderson and Andy Carroll a decade or so before that. They need to smash that transfer record at some point within the next 18 months, I'd say.
Controversial from Alan Thompson, this. Lads, how do you rate Isak? I think he's very good, but he would not get in my top 10 strikers for me for Newcastle unless he stays for 5 to 7 years. Simples. Thoughts?
I think that's a controversial claim. I think that should be added to our next controversial opinions video. Firstly, top 10, he's not in it. I think Alexander Isak, in my best part of quarter of a century watching Newcastle United in the flesh, is up there with the very best I've seen. In terms of actual ability, is what he does in front of goal, he'd be right up there. I get the longevity argument. He's only really done it in terms of being on fire for a season. But in terms of what I've seen and the goals he's scored and the quality he's brought, when he's not always had that quality around him as well. Okay, Anthony Gordon really helped him last season, but in terms of the service, hasn't always had it. And to produce the numbers he's had, and even not his goals, even not his assists, because he got cruelly denied it. That Everton run, he's one of those players, gets you off your feet, he scores goals, but he's really exciting as well. I think, other than Alan Shearer, he's right up there at the very top for me for Newcastle strikers I've seen in the flesh.
There's not much I can add to that, really. His stats speak for themselves. He's a 1 and 2 man in the Premier League, which is stretching out to 60, 70 games. So for me, he's top class.
Do we know if Matt Targett is back in training? He's actually trained this week. If for anyone that is genuinely interested in that question, because he's very behind in the pecking order now. Although there might have been a question asked Eddie Howe on Friday, who knows? But yeah, on the subject of Targett and the Lascelles, or writing them off, making a comeback into the first team.
I'd go
long term. They're not the answers to any questions. So I'm not saying they won't return, but they're not really going to feature, I would imagine, much at all.
Yeah, short-term fixes in games if there's injuries, things like that. Long-term answer, no.
Right, final few then. Lads, do you think we'll go back in for James Trafford?
Seemed to be a player that really, really liked. It wouldn't surprise us. I don't think it would be the biggest surprise in the world if they did. I've not monitored his progress at all this season. If he's been playing, how he's been playing. But it wouldn't surprise us if they went back in for him. They've got a habit of doing that kind of thing.
I'd tend to agree, yeah.
Try and answer this quick then. What do you lads think about Barnes when Howe now seems to favour Big Joe and Willock for that position?
I think Liam's already more or less summed up Harvey Barnes earlier in the stream, where almost world class on the edge of the box, but what else does he offer? And then you look at Joe Linton, who is quite poor in and around the box, but offers so much more to the team.
Final question. What are the chances?
Friend of the channel as well, Chris Hall.
Friend of the channel, Chris Hall. The new Asula song. Liam, you've got a good story about that from the strawberry corner. No, sorry, not the strawberry corner, the opposite corner.
Yeah, well, it's certainly the Wimbledon game. Certainly, it was the high point of a dull encounter. I constantly had my son turn to us towards the end. At least the win, Dad. It doesn't matter. All I had to do was progress. I was like, I know. Would it be nice to see a little bit more for you? Not that we get there much. However, the highlight of the game for my daughter, who was only 8, was there was a rather inebriated man about 4 rows back, attempting for a good 60 minutes to get the Asula song going, and eventually eventually it took off. And it was everyone around us was laughing their heads off, and it was a good bit of fun, and it was much needed when it was a slightly below par performance, but it was all good. We enjoyed ourselves with that one. But no, I'm not going to sing it.
Right, there was questions there we couldn't get through. Try to get through as many as possible. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm assuming we're going to cut it to our lane because we've all got to be off and enjoy our evenings. I've got some reality TV to watch with my lass, which I secretly enjoy, but so I'm going to get off for that. But I'm assuming you guys need to shoot as well. So we've done over an hour, which we said we only stick to an hour. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. We've already plugged the sponsor for Rivers Financial Planning along the bottom of the screen there. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to Geordie Journos. Ring the bell for all your latest Geordie Journos content.
And any thanks as well. You can do the super thanks. That's always an option with these things. We do this all for free. You get this content for free. You get a chance to interact with all of us for free. There's always an opportunity. If you want to donate to the Geordie Journos, you can do. All money that gets donated stays in the channel, and we'll put it towards this kind of thing in the future. And I'll probably try and put it to less sunbeds, I think, for the next position. Right. Is that it, lads? Anything else to add before the end, Dom?
I think no. Just thanks everyone for watching. I was going to say it wouldn't be a Geordie Journos video if it just didn't descend into waffle, but obviously time is of the essence tonight. So I hope everyone's had a good bonfire night, and we've brought some fireworks to your evening, albeit small ones.
I think there'll be sparklers more than fireworks.
Sparklers, aye, that's it.
This evening. Right, so you know the drill. We'll be around. If you did like this, do let me know. You were always attainable, whether that be on Twitter, in the Facebook community, and the community on YouTube, in the comments to this video. Let us know if you like this video. If you want us to do more lives, then do get involved. Oh, we've had a donation just as well. Not
You've got to turn your light on now, Jordan, for Dom.
Jordan to get a light.
I'll dedicate that to a lovely new light for next time we do this. If you guys enjoyed it, we will do more of these, and I promise next time I'll get a new light.
Cheers, Don. I really appreciate that donation. Right, off we go. Good night from the Geordie Journos. Maybe.
Pressure's on, Jordan.
See you.